All right, we've been a couple of weeks out, so you don't remember a whole lot of what we did before anyway. And tonight does connect, but not directly. So we'll get started. I need you to turn to Daniel chapter 9. The issue is this. This chapter has a lot of bearing on the thinking of the premillennialists. They base a lot of their doctrine out of parts of this chapter. Now, most of us don't know much about Daniel except that he was put in the lion's den, and he had 3 friends that were not cooked alive like was planned. And past that, that's pretty much what we know about Daniel. So we don't know how to deal with what the premillennialists are saying about Daniel and how they want to use it. We can agree that they're probably wrong, but then somebody says, well, then what is the right answer? We go, I don't know. I never really thought about it one way or the other. It hadn't mattered to me. So what I'm going to attempt to do, I've tried to figure out any other way to do this. This is going to, I'll tell you up front, it's going to be confusing. I don't intend for it to be, but I honestly don't know how to do it. And you say, well, then why are we doing it? I'm going, because if I don't do it, there's issues that come up that you need to know where it came from. Even if you don't understand it, at least trust me that's where it's coming from. So we're not going to spend a lot of time reading the book Daniel 9, but I want you can have your Bibles open and I'll give you verses along the way. Okay, Daniel 9 was written toward the end of Israel's 70-year bondage when they were in Babylonian captivity. And as it comes to the end of the 70 years, Daniel prays for relief and is wanting God to tell him that everything's going to be okay. He's told that there's going to be another decree of 77s. Now, here's why it gets confusing, because we got all these numbers, they all mean stuff, so it's not just thrown around, but it's a little bit confusing. The new decree assures the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the sanctuary. There will be further desolation though. The Mosaic holy place will be destroyed, and the ritual, the economy, and the commonwealth of the Jews will be destroyed. Okay, it's going to end. Now, this will not have any effect on God's promise to Abraham. God promised Abraham, I'll make of you a great nation, and in your seed will come salvation. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but basically Christ will come through Abraham's seed. All right. The destruction of the Mosaic system that Moses brings in, the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple and the sacrificial system, the destruction of that doesn't change God's promise to Abraham. Okay. He still will hold the truth, or hold his promise of truth that he made to Abraham. So Hebrews states, the book of Hebrews states that a change in the priesthood requires the law be changed. And so removing the law would remove the Mosaic and the economic and the commonwealth of Judaism. In other words, when the law is destroyed, when the law is nailed to the cross, all the Jewish system that they've grown up with, lived with, and tried to obey all these years is now going to be eliminated because something better has come. And of course, the something better is Christ. And if that's confusing at this point, good luck. No, if Sunday morning may help clarify some of that, because that's what Sunday morning is all about. is how the sacrificial system is being replaced when Christ died on the cross. So I'm assuming that you'll be familiar with that. All right, let's look at verse 1. We are not going to read the whole chapter. Please, no, we're not. But beginning in verse 1, in the first year of Darius, son of Xerxes, a Mede by descent, who was made ruler over the Babylonian kingdom, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood from the scriptures, according to the word of the Lord given to Jeremiah the prophet, that the desolation of Jerusalem would last 70 years. All right. We don't know who Darius is, and that really at this point doesn't matter, but I'm just bringing up to speed of what we do and don't know here. We don't know that. But Daniel was a Bible student. He understood, he read the Bible as what we would call the Bible. He read Jeremiah, and he understood Jeremiah to say that there would be a 70-year period of captivity, which had come true, which was coming to an end right about now, and God will do what He said He'll do. So He's asking God, okay, is it about over, and are we through with this? Now, the first year of Darius is either on or around when the 70 years was fulfilled. The Jews have been in captivity for almost 70 years, and Darius, whoever he is, comes in power right at the end of the Babylonian captivity. Now, it's not exactly 70 years, but it's close, and I can show you other instances. I won't, but show you the instances where God rounds up numbers and rounds down numbers, so that we're not talking exact to the day. God doesn't do that, but it is in the general area of 7 years. So Daniel realizes that the 7 years spoken of has reached their end, and everything was going to be all right. But God says everything is not complete. There's yet more to come. Even though, yes, the 70 years is finished, but don't jump to a conclusion, Daniel. Okay, so Daniel's a man of prayer. We know that from our knowledge of Daniel in general, that he prayed 3 times a day, and that's what got him put in the den of lions in the first place. So, but what is the focus of his prayer? This is verses 3 through 19. We're not going to read those, but very quickly, Daniel's guilt and the guilt of Israel for turning from God. Daniel asked for God's mercy on his people, and that everything would return to where it was. In verses 20 through 23, Gabriel the angel appears to again to give Daniel understanding. God always gives before He expects anything in return. In this case, God gives instruction. Now, in verses 24 through 27, these are the verses that the premillennialist will use. I'm going to read them and try to give you what I believe to be the meaning of them, and then we'll come back to the premillennial view of it. 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know and understand this from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler, comes. There will be 77s and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble. After the 62 sevens, the anointed one will be cut off and will have nothing. the people of the ruler will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end. And let's see, hang on just a minute. Will come to an end, and desolations have been decreed. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering, and of the wing of the temple, he will set an abomination that causes desolation until the end of that decreed is poured out on him. All right. Now, all of that, you're going, okay, what? Okay. Here we go. Now, I'm giving you my understanding of Daniel. Okay, this is the true part. This is true and false. This is the true part, as best I know. All right. 77s is 70 weeks. Okay, the 7th is 7 days. All right, has been decreed. Now, there's a whole lot of ways to look at this. And none of them, I mean, there's not a way that I can tell you, this is absolutely the only way to view it. You have to see it this way or you're wrong. But it does not correspond with the premillennial view. We'll get to in a little bit. All right. And this is where I didn't know how much, I don't want to get so deep in the weeds that I'll lose you, okay? And I can get lost myself, so be aware of that. All right. The chronological view. Now, the chronological view says that a day for a year theory. For the 7 days equals 7 years. So 77 is 490 weeks, okay? I mean, a day for year, sorry. Now, notice in Numbers, don't notice, just trust me. Numbers 14 and verse 43. For 40 years, 1 year for each of the 40 days you explore the land, you will suffer for your sins and know what it is like for me to have me against you. The whole point is here, God tells them in Numbers that the 40 years is compared to 40 days. And so the people who believe this, and there are many Christians who do, take this as one of their standpoints of saying, this is how God operates. God uses weeks, has used in the past, weeks to mean years. All right. Now, Ezekiel 4 and verse 4. Then lie on your left side, put the sin of the house of Israel upon yourself. You are to bear their sin for a number of days that you lie on your side. I have assigned the same number of days as the years of their sin. So for 390 days you will bear the sin of the house of Israel. After you have finished this, lie down again, this time on your right side, and bear the sin of the house of Judah. I have assigned you 40 days, a day for each year. Okay, what I'm showing you is they didn't just dream that up. They didn't just imagine. There is biblical, scriptural evidence of God using this system. All right. So, if you thought that's confusing, hang on, we got more. 70 weeks equals 490 days. If I was good with the blackboard, I'd be writing this down, so you'd be looking at it, but I'm not. Which brings us, if you have 70 weeks, you have 490 days. 490 days then translates into 490 years. Okay? That's how you get to 490 years using this system. Now, Some of you are familiar with Haley's Handbook. It was considered a revelation of the earlier time of the church and thought highly of, okay? And I do, I'm not critical of it. But in Haley's Handbook, he uses 458 BC as his starting point. At that time, Artaxerxes issued a decree to Ezra to return to Jerusalem, which is Ezra chapter 7, beginning in verse 11 and following. From that command until the Messiah is 69 weeks, which equals 483 days or 483 years if you make every day, every week a year. Okay? Now, add 483. See, it's so complicated. You're not going to do this. But add 483 years to 458 BC, which equals 25 to 26 AD. About the time of Christ's baptism and anointment of the Spirit. Okay? So they're making a prophecy using years to days to year, months and years and whatever. They get to the idea that this prophecy was fulfilled around the time Christ was on the earth and around the time of his baptism. Okay? Please accept that as what they believe. Now these are the good guys. I don't want to confuse you. This is the true possibility, all right? In the midst of the 70th week, using their system, in the middle of the 70th week, the Messiah will cause the sacrifice to cease, and his death on the cross will end that, and therefore you have your 70th week with his death on the cross ending everything. Okay. Now, let's assume you bought that. Well, first of all, let's assume you understood that. And then let's assume you bought it. Now, is there anything wrong with it? Well, there's a couple of things wrong with it. The first thing that comes to mind is that God never said he's always going to use the same principle throughout all time. When he says that's what he's doing, that's what he's doing. But you can't assume that when he doesn't tell you how he's using the math, you can't just assume, well, it must be like he did the last time. It may be, but that's an assumption. So,
well, and the original language, it was 7 periods of time, wasn't it?
Well, that was in that. Well,
isn't that something
not here.
Translators have.
No, that gets you over to Nebuchadnezzar becoming a beast, and it says 7. It says 7 periods of time there, but it doesn't say it here. Okay, but that is an example where it does. There's variation, all right. Now, secondly, the vision takes the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus in 70 AD. One cannot get to 70 AD. You cannot get there using the chronological method. Now, why am I doing this? I'm illustrating the point that this is not absolutely right. Now, it could be. I'm not saying it's wrong, but you just can't get there and say, okay, then that's got to be the way it is. All right, now, the premillennial view is different. I'm going to skip over what I have there for now. We'll come back to that. A more reasonable view may be the non-chronological view, which is different from the chronological view. All right, let's quickly go through this, and then I'm gonna come back. We're not through with Daniel yet. But, okay, even those who promote the chronological view change it to a figure. Now, why is that important? Why is it important that people who use who used even the premillennial view, what do? They change it themselves to fit their idea. We'll get to their idea in a minute. But the point is, remember the premillennial view. There is no figures used. Well, they can't make sense out of this. No one can make sense out of this unless you use some sort of figurative speech. Now, we can debate figures and all that, but you just can't get there if you use exact numbers here. You won't get anywhere close to anything. So that's a problem. And the idea really is that numbers are used to indicate the final and complete decree concerning end of Jewish commonwealth. In other words, if you use the number 7, which is used throughout the Bible, all the way from the beginning of time, not quite Garden of Eden, but almost, up through the Revelation, numbers are forever being used figuratively. And this is a Jewish way of thinking. It's common to the Jewish thinking. They have no problem accepting it, or they don't have a problem accepting these numbers as standing for something. And the number 7 stands for completeness. Okay, throughout the Bible. Now, there's going to be an occasion where it's really 7. I understand it, but anytime in a figurative way, it means complete. So, what is Daniel being told? Daniel is being told the end is about here. It's about complete, but it's got another little bit to go. But then, when it gets there, it will be complete. Forget the number. Okay, forget the idea of trying to make the number fit anything. It's not meant to fit anything. It's meant to designate completeness. Okay, the end of the commonwealth of Judaism is going to be when Christ dies on the cross. Now, when did it finally come to an end? It didn't end then. When did it finally actually come to an end? How about AD 70? Why? Because Rome comes in and just blows the thunder out of everything. So the sacrifices, the temple, everything's gone. But that's not when it ended. Okay? It ended when Christ died on the cross, as far as God was concerned. Everything the Jews did in sacrificing animals and all those things was unnecessary between the time Christ died and was resurrected, of course, but died and resurrected, and AD 70. God gave them about 40 years to figure it out, and they didn't. You remember we talked about the temple, the curtain being split. Okay, what was that? That was God saying, this is over. We're not going to do this anymore. There's no longer a blockage between man and God that has a earthly priesthood in it. Because why? Because we have one high priest, it's Christ, and we are ourselves priests as we become Christians. Now, we no longer need that curtain because Christ went through there one time for all time. However, the Jews didn't want to believe that. So every Sabbath they kept offering sacrifices. Worthless as it was, because God said, I'm through with it. I showed you I'm through with it. I split the stupid curtain. I split the earth open. People were raised to death. All kinds of things happen, and you still want to keep doing the same thing. So, the number 7, the 70 weeks, all the sevens are indicative of the completion of God's plan, of that part of his plan, and moving on into the new covenant. All right, now let's go back through these 3 verses again, and I'll try to explain them a little more carefully. All right, 70 weeks are decreed upon the people and upon the holy city to finish transgressions and to make an end to the sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring everlasting righteousness and to seal up vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. All right. Finishing the transgression, which it says is going to take place. There's a couple of possibilities. One is that the Lord will deal with transgressions and put them away with his death on the cross. Or it could be during the 70 weeks, they will do their worst. And the worst they can do is what? Kill the Son of God. So we're talking about the same thing, but just depending on how you particularly want to view it. Now it says we're going to make you'll make an end to sin. Sin will run to its peak. The greatest sin, if there is any grades of sin, will be committed at this time, which is what? Killing the Son of God. It's hard to imagine a sin more sinful than killing the Son of God. And then to deal with it once and for all in an atoning way. Sin will be run to its hilt, and it will at the same time be atoned for one time for all in the same act. The sin will be killing Christ. The atonement will come because of the death of Christ. To make reconciliation for iniquities, it says. Reconciliation and forgiveness are 2 different things, though they're interrelated. But it will be both both forgiveness and a reconciliation. There must be forgiveness, and then people can be reconciled to God. Now, it works the same way with people, but now we're talking our relationship with God. How do we get back into a forgiven, reconciled state with God? Through Christ. And how do we do that? Through obedience to the gospel. It'll bring about everlasting righteousness. How is that going to happen? Well, with Christ's death on the cross, when we're saved, we're saved everlastingly as long as we continue to rely on the blood of Christ for our forgiveness, continual forgiveness. To seal up the vision, there's 2 possibilities here. To render the vision so that no one can understand it, blinding the people, as Isaiah speaks of. There'll be people who will not understand the vision because they will be blinded to it. It won't be because it's impossible to understand.
It is.
But it will be because people have chosen not to understand it. And the other possibility is that with the coming of the Messiah, the vision will be fulfilled and prophecy will cease. With the coming of Christ, there are no more prophecies as there were then, because why? We have said this many, many times. We will say it yet another time. Christ came and did what? he fulfilled all prophecy. So prophecy regarding Old Testament prophecy, prophecy of the prophets of the Old Testament is finished. It's done. It is completed. It's sealed up because it will never happen again. There will never be another Old Testament prophecy fulfilled after Christ dies, is buried, and is resurrected. Okay, then the idea is the idea of anointing the most holy. Jesus, as he was anointed by the Father and becoming the Christ, and his baptism is one possibility. The church with the Holy Spirit might be the other possibility. Might be that God will destroy the sanctuary and anoint a new sanctuary known as the church. In other words, the sanctuary of the temple is no longer in existence. There is not a single room, a single location where God resides, as he did in the most holy place of the temple. Where does God reside now? In each of us, as we become the temple of God. Instead of having an earthly existence in a single room, God now resides in us as Christians, which I can't avoid it, and I'm trying, can't get away from it. One of the reasons I do not like the song, "Make Me a Sanctuary." I'm not a sanctuary. I'm the temple. I will not be satisfied to be one stupid room when I can be the whole thing. God cannot make you a sanctuary. Now, when you obey the gospel, you become a sanctuary, okay? But God can't just come down and say, well, I mean, he could, but God's not going to come down and say, hi, Bill, today you're a sanctuary. No. What has Bill done? He's obeyed the gospel and he has become, you become a sanctuary, you don't, or a temple. You become it, you're not made it. Made it implies that even against your will, God, I want you to make me a sanctuary no matter what. No. I'm obedient, and my obedience causes God to make me a sanctuary. I become a sanctuary because of my obedience to the gospel. So you may not see that as a big deal. I do, because I think it changes the direction, it changes the emphasis of what we are in God's sight as part of the temple of God, which Paul says we become. Your body becomes and is the temple of God, not the sanctuary, the whole thing. And therefore God dwells in each of us. All right. Now, okay. Know that, verse 25, know therefore and discern that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the anointed one, the prince, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It shall be built again with street and moat, even in turbulous times, troublesome times, excuse me. No. Okay. Going forth of the command, here's how the history lays out for the idea. There are several possibilities of when all of this starts, but the point of it is that it occurs around the time that Daniel is speaking, okay? So you've got 3 different dates, 445, 468, or 539 BC regarding the rebuilding of the temple and all of that. until Messiah, the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now, the 7 weeks relates to the completion of the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Just a second. From the going forth of the command to rebuild Jerusalem to the coming of the Messiah is 7 weeks and 62 weeks. 7 weeks relates to the completion of the rebuilding of Jerusalem. 62 weeks are passed over in silence, and one is brought to the Messiah. Why I'm making the point here is, you don't have to know all this stuff. I don't even know it. I mean, not like I can do it without notes. But what I want you to get, the point is, Daniel is talking about what? What is the end result of this 62, 7 weeks, all this stuff? What is the end result? The end result is Christ. Okay? That's the prophecy is about the coming of the Messiah. All right? That's what it's about. You say, okay, no, I can accept that and buy that, fine. Well, the premillennialists don't. And we're not going to get to it today. I didn't think we would, but I was hoping. There's just too much here. But trust me on this, that all of the prophecy, and we won't have time to go into all the details. I'd like to. I've got them here, and it's interesting, but it's time consuming. But the bottom line is Daniel's prophecy, or the prophecy given to Daniel. It's not his prophecy, but the prophecy given to Daniel is referring to Jesus coming. Okay. This is not going to be the way you're going to find the premillennialists looking at this. Why? Well, they have a problem. And their problem is simple. They got to make everything literal. And they're going to twist this every which way but loose, trying to get something said, but using literal numbers. And it's not going to fly. Now, why did I not waste necessarily, but why did I spend the time? Well, as we go through this next week now, in the premillennial view, we have to remember what we said today in order for this to work. But you're going to see it doesn't match up. Now, you can say all until you're blue in the face, I don't agree with the premillennial view. And they'll look at you and say, why? And you'll say, I don't know. I just don't because I know I'm not supposed to. Okay? And clear and simple. Now, I was told as a kid, don't believe the premillennial view. Nobody told me why, but I know I'm not supposed to. So I'm not. Okay? And they say, well, then you explain it. You explain Daniel. You don't like my explanation. And we kind of go, well, how about we go back to the lion's den? I mean, that I understand, okay? Or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or whatever. In other words, our problem is that we have not spent time, a great deal of time, studying the Old Testament prophets past the good stories. You know, we know the miracles, we know the stories, we're quite familiar with that, we sing about it, we teach our kids and all this. And then once you get past the stories, which are interesting and timely and need to be studied, don't get me wrong, but we don't know what Daniel really was all about in order to defend the position of saying your view of your premillennial view is incorrect because why? Because I said so, because my mother said so, because my dad said so, and by the way, the teacher on Wednesday afternoon said so. And I didn't get much out of this lesson either. What I want you to get, please understand, that Daniel is being told about Christ's coming. And how you get there, it takes a long time to get, okay? In other words, I would normally, when I taught Daniel before, and some of you were in here when I taught Daniel, and if you recall, we spent more than a few weeks on all these prophecies besides the lion's den and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. For me to cover today, obviously, is not, possible. But I think maybe you get the idea of how it would be interpreted to fit Christ and to fit a timeline that is not hours, days, and minutes of sevens, but of a completeness. That's the key takeaway, if you will, that I want you to get, is that the numbers do not mean specific times, specific days. They're talking about the idea of what? Completed activity. At the end of 70 weeks and 69, okay, 69 is not finished, okay, but we got to have the crucifixion, we got to have these things. That's why it's not finished. But when you get all the sevens put in there, the work that Christ came to do was to fulfill the law and the prophets. And Christ said, I did it. And Daniel says, I now know why I was using the number 7 so often. It wasn't literal, but it was figuratively set up. So, next week, Lord willing, we will tackle the premillennial view, which will be considerably different. I could have tackled it today, but if you don't know what Daniel's talking about or what they're talking about, because you haven't recently studied this, you go, okay, Roger said it's wrong. I guess it's wrong, but I don't know why. Today was hopefully to give you a very, 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 very short introduction to what Daniel was speaking of, so that when we get to next week, we can look at the incorrect version that the premillennialist will have us believe. I appreciate your time. I hope I didn't overly confuse you. I hope it wasn't a total waste of time. Trust me, God's will gets done, and whether I understand all the prophecies about it, I have to have the faith that says, I don't understand it, but I do believe it. And belief requires faith. Understanding is strictly looking at the facts. God said you're going to live by, as Christians, you're going to live by faith, not by facts. Do we have facts? Sure we have facts. Are they accurate? Sure they are. But God didn't say you're going to live by your own understanding of the facts. He said you're going to live by faith. So what we've got to do is look at these things and know that whether we can completely define every little incident and detail, because God didn't give us that much information. But God said, that's okay. I've given you enough information that you can trust me with the rest of it. I've shown you throughout history that when I said something, it came true. And I have plenty of evidence of that. So if I said something and you don't see the end result of it, because I chose not to reveal it to you, you can still know that it came true. And in the day of, when you get to heaven and you're either in a city or you're not in a city and there's a golden street or there's not a golden street, you can say to God, okay, now God, how about we go back through that 70-week thing that Roger messed up so badly? And how about you explain it? Maybe when you explain it to me, I'll understand it a whole lot better than I did when he tried to explain it to me. God would say, sure, I can, and when he explains it, you'll understand it perfectly. And then by then it'll all fit together real well because you'll be looking at it from the other side of eternity and you'll say, oh, sure, I see that now, but I couldn't see it then. So please be patient with me and let me get through next week because we're going to go back through this again. Not in the same way, but we're going to go back to it again, except next week we'll look at it from their point of view. And you will see quite a bit of discrepancy between what they want this to be and what the Bible seems to indicate or does indicate it is. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you next week.